Hello, everyone. Welcome to this conversation. This year, the Said Business School is celebrating its 25th anniversary. And to celebrate this milestone, rather than looking backwards over the last 25 years, we are focusing on the future of business. During this year, under the banner Business the Next 25 Years, we're producing a series of articles, events, and podcasts during which we explore many of the challenges business will face over the next quarter century. My name is Agni Orfanoudaki. I'm an associate professor of operations management here at the Said Business School. And today, it is my real pleasure and honor to have with me Andrew Wilson to discuss together the role of technology and what we'll do in our working lives, both now and in the future. So Andrew is here. For those of you who don't know him, Andrew is the Chief Digital Officer at Microsoft, responsible for its digital transformation. He has more than 30 years of business leadership and IT experience across multiple industries in consulting, operations, transformation, and shared services. He has served roles like the Chief Executive Officer of GE Capital IT Solutions and then as Chief Information Officer at Accenture for 7 years. So before we start our conversation, to everyone who's joining us today, we would like to make our conversation as interactive as possible. So please submit your questions on the Mentimeter so that Andrew and I have the chance to respond to you directly. Andrew, thank you very much for coming. We've seen all that you've had a remarkable journey in industry over the past 30 years, switching across many industries. And looking at all these different sectors, and correct me if I'm mistaken, it seems to me that data has been the common denominator. How has the use of data evolved over time? What has changed?
Well, first of all, Agni, hello. It's good to be here. And I'd say hi to everyone who's joining us today. I hope everyone is safe and well and recovering from what I know has been a disruptive time in this strange world. I love technology, and I love the fact that technology has been at the heart of much of business for certainly all the time I've been in business and around tech. I think you're right when you call out data. Well, data is one of the themes in technology, which I think is becoming more mainstream in the dialogue. Technology has gone through eras where perhaps we thought more about systems and transaction processing and the user experience and things like that, all of which are still valid. The data, to an extent, may have been a byproduct, trapped in systems of record and very much owned by different types of cultures within different organizations. And so data would follow, typically the finance team or the marketing team or the sales team or the legal team. I think what's happening now is that enterprises are realizing that for them to be as clever, agile, fast, pacey, informed, right, and ahead of the game, they've got to get more out of their data. Their systems, and candidly, when you work in the cloud, a lot of the cloud-based services are replete with data. And now we have things like the Internet of Things, and we have whole campuses and locations that are creating data, and we're creating more and more data all the time. An organization needs to think about how it's going to react to that, how it's going to manage that, how it's going to get the balance right between the data being available and yet used appropriately. And we also have the positive disruptor, I think, of AI coming on, artificial intelligence. So you can do more with data now, and you can do it proactively rather than just looking backwards. So I think what's changing with data is it's moving into real time and proactive. It's being used to connect across enterprises differently to how it was possible in the past. In the organizations I've run, you kindly mentioned some of what I've been doing. With Accenture and in Microsoft, the teams which I've led, which are responsible for data, have been elevated up to my main leadership team. And the technologists have joined the data scientists, have joined those who are responsible for giving the business the insights that it needs. So actually, the technologists have become much more enablers of business, and that's primarily through the data agenda. And so enterprise insight, I think, becomes ever more powerful if it's got right. Now, to get that right, you've got to be able to leverage the technology of the day. The technology of the day now benefits from cloud. So you can do more now with data. You can scale it. So one of the challenges in the past is data action processing in nature were not of the scale to analyze data. They were there to create it, and they were there to drive individual discrete transactions. But when you come to think about how to connect and then process at bulk and compute at what increasingly needs to be a central source of data that is better managed. One of the other challenges enterprises have is they don't know necessarily all the data they've got. They don't know where it is. They don't know who's using it, and they don't know what it's being used for. And they're not in control of its currency. And then obviously some of the more boring aspects, but still important, they're not really optimizing the cost of storage management. And data is hugely important from a compliance and a regulatory perspective, particularly I think now, I'm sure many are familiar with Sarbanes-Oxley on the financial process side and finance data, but organizations now need to step up across diversity and inclusion, across sustainability, across a number of different social agendas, let alone the economics of business. And they've got to get their data right. So I think this is the perfect time for a new data perspective inside a digital transformation strategy. And I think it's a very, very pertinent area of technology and of transformational change generally.
Thank you. Yeah, fantastic. I mean, data is really changing like all aspects of industry, and a very important topic that I think you touched upon recently is like about who really owns that data. Like it's everywhere within the organization, and a few people are talking about data democratization. How can we share and leverage data across companies and users, and who can really access them? Are they owned by the business unit who recorded them, or by the individual or the entity that produced them? What would be the implications of such a move? What are your thoughts on that?
Data democratization is one theme, perhaps alongside code democratization, perhaps alongside AI. And there the question of responsible AI is raised. And I think they all intersect at something which you might not expect a technologist to lead with and talk about, and that's culture. But the culture of an organization is central to a lot of what will be happening and a lot of what needs to happen. What I mean by that is the culture of the way work is done, the philosophy of work, how much collaboration is a function of that, or is it command control? Who owns the data, the willingness for that data to be shared, the nature of the regulatory regime that applies to that industry or that country or that global entity in which the data is being managed and processed. I think the nature of the data in terms of the customer relationship, privacy concerns, secrecy concerns, all of those things intersect. And the technologist has to help their organization decide what they want to be. So how open they want to be, how accessible is their data philosophy going to be to the data scientists, the broader user inside the organization, the customer, the end customer. And so those questions, which won't come out of any individual technology transformation or capability, are really, really fundamental. We at Microsoft, of course, big enterprise around since 1975, we've had to ask the same very question about ourselves. I think Microsoft's experience, if you put aside for a moment the fact that Microsoft is a technology provider for the world, Microsoft, a big organization, grown very rapidly through a number of eras where its persona and its products and services have changed very much, with a very large number of customers and users. Customers who can be individuals in gaming and Microsoft 365 and things like that, all the way through to the biggest enterprises in the world who are consuming huge amounts of Microsoft 365 and cloud and Azure and data and things like that. The system tail and the data trail of those decades of growing and operating with different services and different relationships with customer leads to a huge tapestry of systems, data views of customer, records, types of commercial arrangement, types of consumption arrangement, as it moved from literally producing disks and stamping out licenses all the way through to running Azure and the computer for the world. That needs tidying up. So we've created a data lake, and we are really working hard. And it's not something that happens overnight. We've done 2.5 years of this now to create what I would think is roughly about 80% of the data that we want to be in the lake is now in the lake. That gives us the ability to drive single view of customer. You might think it obvious how an organization should know who its customer is, but what if that customer is a global organization with massive numbers of entities underneath it that's moved through several decades of use of very different products supported by many different systems through all of Microsoft's era? To know that customer and to know what that customer is using, why, how, with what success, and then be able to guide and consult that customer in appropriate use in further sales, candidly. And all of that is being informed by a better view of customer. And that's why data is so important. Understanding your customer base, understanding your employee base as well. Another major theme in the technology world at the moment is hybrid work and the future and the nature of work. And as I said, most organizations, irrespective of whether or not they've been frontline through the pandemic or whether they've been information worker working largely virtually, will now be asking, what is the nature of work and how will it be done in our organization? How will we remain connected to our employees? How will that engagement drive us to be a great employer and one that people want to come and work with and stay with? Those questions apply to Microsoft. They apply elsewhere as well.
Yes, indeed. And I think what you're describing is like using data in like more than 3 levels. Like there's the descriptive side, which is like, okay, what kind of information can we extract from the data? There's the predictive side, which I think where machine learning and AI is coming into play. And it's like, can we generate new estimations or predictions about the future behavior? But there's also an interesting aspect, which is the prescriptive side, meaning like, can we use data directly to drive decision-making without like human intervention? And this is the area which is, I think, more confrontational today. Do you think that there are some cases in which we could be using directly technology to drive decision-making within the business, or will we will always have some sort of human supervision?
I think AI is already present. We've talked about it for a long time. AI comes along with cloud-based services. So I think decisions are made, inferences are made, and decisions are made without human intervention, as you say. So I think the human role is, first of all, to establish the right culture and the right responsibility framework for AI, fairness, appropriateness, reliability, transparency are all principles which we are looking at hard to say, how do we make sure that they're embedded in our logic, in our self-learning systems? And then how do you curate those? How do you train, hire, if you like, and then manage that AI and ultimately retire it? How do you performance manage it? I used to say that I feel sometimes like I'm the chief HR officer for the non-human workforce. And I wasn't saying it just to get a laugh on the stage. It feels really true. When I was in Accenture, I had about 100,000 people doing business process outsourcing. But a phenomenon that occurred along the way was the automation of those processes was increasing. And that meant that the humans were managing the machines that were managing the process, making the decisions. And that's when it all became a data-first economy and business and value proposition. So I think that we have to be careful, but I don't think we should be overly fearful because it works. So long as we can prove and make the operation of AI, as I say, transparent, fair, measurable, graded, and not left to operate in isolation or in too much of a black box, essentially. And I think that's at the heart of a lot of things. I don't think some of the speed of services and the nature and intuition of services that we have today would be working without AI. So when you get recommendations, when you see in your experience as a customer in the commercial world, in everything from entertainment through buying things online, you can see AI at work. That's not a bad thing. It just needs to be moderated, and therefore governance, a boring word. Everyone talks about governance in enterprise, and everyone shrugs and goes, "Oh no!" It's alongside security, one of the two words that people flinch at. It's absolutely essential. You need to be able to demonstrate to your business, your customers, to your shareholders, to your board, that you have an engine that is being managed appropriately and effectively. And that's always been the case. It's just that the technology platforms on which that is now occurring have changed.
Definitely. And from my experience, like working primarily in the healthcare space, this is even more prominent, like the issues of like transparency, interpretability, performance. This is a high stakes decision making that become even more important. And, like AI and like neural networks are really like very hard to interpret the way we understand them right now. And one of the questions that comes into play is like, okay, we really need responsible AI, but if we are not able to understand exactly how it works, how are we going to get there? And at the end of the day, if we're talking about self-driving vehicles or automated like decision making, does AI really have liability, or does it lie on the shoulders of people like you that are kind of managing the whole AI within the organization?
I mean, they're big questions, aren't they? Because who is responsible for the performance of the AI of the self-driven car? Clearly, it's out there on the road with the buyer. Clearly, it's created by somebody. I think it's easier to think about AI services that I'll call it centrally provided, that are part of a cloud-based service where you can identify ownership and accountability. And I think these questions, which is why I say we're on a rich journey on this, need further clarification, and I don't think all of the answers are there yet. And I think that's why you can't run an enterprise with the old approach to data. Right? Data in silos, hidden, static, aging, inaccurate, won't fly. So who owns everything? How is it ensured to be current, consistent, aligned? Who then validates the use cases for which it is being leveraged? Who is accountable for the quality and reliability of those results, the consistency of those results? Who is responsible for ensuring that the service, so the security and the privacy, to your point about healthcare, a very good example, is at the bar of certainly what the organization expects and absolutely what the regulatory regime for that industry expects. All of those things are sort of foundational. And I do think we're making progress, but I don't think every question is answered. And I think some of those big facial examples, like autonomous vehicles, are the ones that will ultimately be the longest to answer. We have if I think about the nature of being the technologist in an organization, it used to be all about service level agreements, system availability, running data centers, coding things, building things, running things. Now I think about the agenda, and it's about the responsible AI agenda, as we've talked about. It's also about things like sustainability and diversity and inclusion, because if the technology isn't working correctly, then an organization will not be performing on those measures. And by the way, that's what the workforce of today and tomorrow demands of their employer. And that's what the customer base demands of the service provider or producer of the goods and services that they want to consume. So technology is really at the very, very heart of business success, in a way even more so than ever before. And that's gone alongside data rising in its ascendance, based on your first question.
Yeah, and I'd like to touch on your last point here about diversity and inclusion. Like, do you think that technology can positively impact the diversity that we notice in the working environment? Can data really help us, or other technologies, create more inclusive working environments?
I think it does. I think it is doing, and I think it will continue to do. If I think about the substantial workforces I've been responsible for, certainly, let's say over the last 10 years, we've cared about making sure that culturally workforce is celebrated, respected, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you are. And I think technology has been one of the industries that's been most on the main stage for setting the North Star for this. It's hard to argue, I certainly wouldn't, with any of the objectives of diversity and inclusion. There are also some business realities to it, which is the human workforce is still the most rare commodity we have. And so we also need to reflect absolutely our full customer base, our user base, Microsoft more so than ever, because with a very, very large number of individual consumers using our productivity and collaboration solutions as an example, our gaming solutions as an example. So it's absolutely vital that we are behaving in a manner that makes us exactly who we're serving. Our products and services won't reflect what our users need if we don't. We won't have access to all of the talent that we could have access to. And I think as well, the demands of the workforce, as I said, and I don't want to underestimate it enough. I think it's really important that employers stand up and be that North Star. I've enjoyed sponsorship of LGBTQ pride communities. I've enjoyed sponsorship of vet communities. I think diversity on gender, on race, on religion, all of those things are really important for a modern, agile, relevant global workforce. And if technology isn't going to lead the way, then what industry is going to? So, how do you know you've got one? You measure it, don't you? And then you set targets and you drive. You look for behavior and bias, unconscious bias in processes, in behaviors. Organizations have a lot of muscle memory. Processes have a lot of codified bias in them over the months or years in which they've operated. So you've got to really engineer and look for all of that to say, how do you create that fairness in process, in selection, in reward? How do you look forward to make sure that you are not operating in a bias that's going to unfavorably treat a demographic? So, I mean, for the technologists, you need I talked about a single view of customer. You need a single view of employee as well. Accenture now has over 600,000 employees. Microsoft has getting on for 200,000. I mean, these are very large numbers of humans all over the world who have skills, knowledge, commitment. They have an employment relationship. How do you appropriately measure and record who you have and then drive consistency and good mix and things like gender diversity and things like that? And by the way, you've got to be careful because you can't just measure and record and report all of that in every country. There are some very clear rules about what can and cannot be recorded, and then what can be amalgamated and consolidated into numbers and not. And so you've got to get the balance right between using data to drive the right behavior and to create that level playing field, but not to either penalize or break any local compliance or regulation in terms of what you're allowed to record and talk about in terms of workforce.
Absolutely. And as you said, managing these cultural differences in a global world is actually like a very interesting challenge on its own. I think like the COVID-19 pandemic probably, like other than reshaping the working environment, offered like more opportunities for like diversity within organizations by opening up the window of remote work, by giving like the chance of everybody working in a hybrid format, and even people who wouldn't be physically possible to be within a certain organization, they're now able to participate. Are there some challenges that come with that change? Like, are there some issues that you foresee? And I think Microsoft really led the way by introducing Teams and having like more and more features being added on the platform. But is it like all pros, or are there some cons on that too?
I think the nature of the way work is done and hybrid and virtual are one of those major themes of the world and of digital transformation now. So it's a huge topic. I think of it probably in three phases. A phase where over the last 15 years or so, we go all the way back to AOL Instant Messenger, to AIM, to Microsoft Office Communicator, to Skype, to Zoom, to Teams. We were a virtually collaborative world well before the pandemic. One of the reasons I know Microsoft so well is because I was their biggest commercial customer when I was at Accenture. So we were the biggest Skype in the world, and we celebrated that. We were the biggest Teams in the world, doing hundreds of millions of minutes of audio and video collaboration well before the pandemic. And that was because the business model of a global workforce who will never, ever get together demands that collaboration can be achieved without everybody being on the same campus or in the same building. And that's one of the reasons I enjoyed working for Accenture, because I felt that we were testing and at the leading edge of both the behavior, but also the scale of virtual collaboration. Teams came along because there was a recognition that that era, that first stage, needed to move to a second stage, which is we don't just want to do point-to-point video and instant messaging. We want to enable rich conferences and calls. And it's a good job we did, and Zoom did it as well, because we then were forced to accelerate adoption of that with different start points. So I hope that most CIOs and CDOs had a digital strategy that had got their organization ready. The good news is cloud had come along, collaborations platforms had come along, and you had Teams and Zoom and other things that could enable a business to switch to virtual. The level of reaching and change that occurred in each business for those that did go virtual would have been very different. For Accenture, probably business as usual, more scale. Microsoft, oddly, because they are a premier fascia, we're still very, very wedded to our campuses. I mean, Microsoft, the largest campus is in Pacific Northwest in the United States, where I'm based in Redmond. It's called the Puget Sound area. And then all the big campuses in Silicon Valley and then in other parts of the world as well. Microsoft had a big shift, like many organizations, to switch, but they were collaboration ready. I would say collaboration ready, not collaboration practicing at hyperscale. I think other organizations that had to scramble will have reflected your digital strategy needs to be more proactive in the future. At Microsoft, we wanted to make sure we could power that, and we were pleased, but without any complacency, that Teams could scale and support hospitals and governments and organizations. And so Teams massively scaled, and that was only possible because of cloud infrastructure, basically. And so that second era, I think, which many are still in right now, proved that business models could work virtually, proved that you could continue to be productive, proved that the world wouldn't stop and that we could get through a pandemic. But big questions now exist for the future. For those that went virtual, they largely went fully virtual. So everybody was on a level playing field, if you like. What happens when we go back to that uncomfortable situation where you've got a big conference room, with 10 people in it, and then you've got 5 or 10 other people dialing in? I think many would recognize that, a little picture on the gallery of a room where you can't even work out who's in it, let alone which one is speaking, is not a rich collaboration experience. Equally, if you're in the room, where do you look? Would you look at the content? Do you look at cameras? Who is out there dialing in? You don't know. And then if you are dialing in, who else is dialing in? And do you see them as well as, or better actually, than the people in the room? So we're asking some really fundamental questions about, can that work and what needs to happen next to make it better? And that's when we start to think about the third phase in my little 3-step phases. But other things are happening as well. You've got much richer compute power. You've got collaboration devices that are much cleverer. So a good example, many will be familiar with the round table device that you put a camera in the middle of the table. But that device was only generating one video feed of the active speaker. helpful, but not really helping the system know everybody in the room, perhaps using facial recognition, perhaps certainly using audio recognition to organize the meeting using AI real time to create views of everybody in the room, everybody remote, and create more of a level playing field, like a gallery, like a together mode. I think this is where, I know this is where we're going. So you've got the hardware coming in, you've got Teams software being upgraded, you've got the ability to represent yourself as an avatar in a digital realm, and a digital realm that's coming, which is called the metaverse, which some say, I think they're probably right, is as potentially disruptive, exciting, and enabling as the arrival of the internet. In the days when an organization needed to think about its web persona for the first time, the fact that its customers could look at it, find out about it, and talk to it through a website, that was revolutionary 20 years ago. I think the metaverse, three-dimensional space, avatars, part virtual reality, augmented reality, and the future of work are all coalescing in this third phase, where there are some big questions around representation of an individual, ability to visit organizations, on the block, in the city of the metaverse, to consume products and services, to have a digital only persona, a digital only relationship with an employer, or with a providing organization as a customer. These are huge things. Teams is going to be, I believe, the window into this world. So it won't all come along at once, but how do we interact, not just in conference calls? How do we undertake work through workflow and process? How do we visit the metaverse? How do we join virtual events that are not just a conference call, but are like the Consumer Electronics Show, but they're in a three-dimensional space where I'm either there as a viewer or I'm an avatar and I'm physically present to others and able to interact with others. How do I make this more engaging and a more rich, real experience? Because whatever the level of the pandemic and the response and moving on from it, what we've proven is we can work in more and different ways than we originally thought. So I think it's an overused phrase, but we'll never go back. We're all saying that. We'll never go back to the old world. What we mean by that is we'll behave like the old world, but we'll behave in other ways as well. And that is the new world. So there's more diversity of behavior. That's what I mean when I say an organization's got to think about the nature of how work is undertaken, how teams are going to be encouraged to collaborate, what the location policy is for your workforce. You see some big fascias being very clear about what their return to work policy is. They never really left or stopped working. They just stopped attending physical sites in many cases. I think what we found is humans want to have some conflicting objectives. They really like the virtual nature of things because it gives them more flexibility and arguably a better quality of life. But they miss that connection and that connective tissue, if you like, with an employer and with colleagues at work. How do you provide both? So big questions there that are around culture, they're around HR policy, they're around location policy, they're around remuneration. And that's all before you get to, and can the technology deal with it as well? So it's a huge space that your question tees up. It's one of the reasons why I think it's one of the most exciting times to be in technology, because we have to enable this and get all of this right.
Definitely. And, we've been witnessing exactly the same things in the educational space, like the way we deliver educational content, the way we reach out to our students, the way we organize our courses. It's not the same right now. You can have way more reach by doing everything online.
Sorry to interrupt you, Agni. One of the things, I'm not someone who likes to constantly talk about products and services because I don't want to come across as a salesperson. But there is something going on which I keep an eye on. It's called Viva, and it's the concept of an experience platform. So Teams has to date been a collaboration / productivity platform, but an experience platform means that you can learn, navigate knowledge, and collaborate more informally and operate that connective tissue with your employer and your colleagues differently and outside of a conference call. And it manifests on different devices in a similar manner. So we're in the early stages of Viva, but I would keep an eye on Viva, because I would predict that a virtual student of the business school in 5 years' time is going to have a very different digitally powered relationship with the school, powered by experience platforms just like Viva.
Exactly. Like we have a lot to learn, and we are actively changing like our material every year because of these recent developments in tech. So at this point, I'd like to open it to our audience. First of all, everybody like who is watching us, please submit your questions on the Mentimeter, and we'll discuss with them with Andrew. But I have already some very interesting questions coming up. So George from London, he's asking what Microsoft is doing to help create a sustainable world. And this kind of question becomes even more and more pertinent these days. We've been experiencing a climate crisis, now recently an energy crisis. What is Microsoft thinking about that?
Microsoft is thinking and doing quite a bit, but recognizes it's a journey, and recognizes we're in it for the long haul. So, and recognizes that Microsoft needs to be a great example of an organization that is managing its own footprint and its own sustainable future, but then also recognizing, because it's a technology provider for the world and it has the cloud and it has AI, that it needs to help other companies be able to do the same as well, and use its own experience on doing it to itself first to help speed up other customers and across industry. So first, I think there's probably 2 or 3 groups of things. The first of all, it's to have the intent and it be real. So to make absolutely clear what our targets are for carbon neutral, carbon negative, water, and all the other measures. And Microsoft has very publicly, along with many organizations, made it clear what it intends to do. That's all around removing carbon, ultimately being net neutral, and ultimately removing the entire historical footprint. It's very challenging to do that in a high growth industry. And so Microsoft will always be careful about being in it for the long run. So you'll have seen some recent announcements about us. They'll look mixed. They'll say, wow, Microsoft are really reaching hard for, but some of its consumption's gone up. Why? That's because the data centers and the cloud is getting much bigger, but we're in it for the long haul. We internally, and back to your data point, we knew that, and we believe that the focus on sustainability will increase and become more audited and measurable through time. And it could ultimately be like Sarbanes-Oxley and financial accountability. So it's really important to be able, as an organization, to understand your carbon footprint and your other measures, and to do it openly, transparently, fairly, accurately, back to all of the principles of data. So to do it and connect all of that data from many different systems, and to understand your supply chain, because a lot of your footprint is actually from other organizations, products and services you consume. It's not directly just you. Sound familiar? So hence the data lake, hence a common data model for all of the ingestion sources that determine what you're doing and what you're impacting sustainably at any point in time. And then an ability to use that compute I described to be able to create auditable reports that can be made transparent and published so that we can measure our progress and drive our behavior. That's what we're doing. So our data lake is powering our corporate reporting on sustainability in a way it didn't before. The data lake, though, and that common data model, if I had to get technical for a moment, is the forerunner of something which is called the Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability. And that is the product and the service that customers will be able to consume that is learning from our own adoption of the common data model. So whether or not you've got a lake and a common data model or not, you can adopt the Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability and start to measure yourself, set targets, know where you're going, and it being done in an open, fair, and measurable way that could be audited through time based on the regulation that exists at that point in time. So I think Microsoft, alongside other organizations, realizes it's a big and will be and continue to be a big organization that needs to operate with integrity, with impact, and create a capability that others can leverage as well. I think it's one of the most exciting areas for data, but also for the persona of an organization going forward. You know, that talent workforce, that nature of work, the safe sustainability equation, all of these things are about what life in the world is in the future, and technology is at the heart of all of them. I'm wondering, I can't hear anybody now. I think we may have lost Agni, which is interesting given it's her show. So I'll keep going if you like. I think one of the other things that technology has helped me do is work out ways of communicating with humans differently. I say that because what we're doing now reminds me of the TV show I used to run in Accenture. And you may think, why is a CDO talking about TV shows? The modern workforce does not want to read emails. The modern workforce doesn't want to read documents. So doing video, doing TVs, that video training that we created for the world is as much an important part of what a CDO does to create that culture inside the organization as running systems. So I used to do the monologue. I used to interview people. I still do, just as Agni's doing here. And then people expected jokes and humor. And so that then tees up authenticity in leadership. And I know that that's possibly not the conversation today, but a technologist needs to be able to navigate all of that if they're going to be successful in this new and very agile world. Agni, I think you might be back. I think you might be on mute as well. Okay. I've been chatting away, hoping that people can hear me. But
yeah, I'm sorry, my internet froze. I guess these are some of the issues of the digital world that we're discussing about.
All I can say is I'm pleased it's not on the network I'm responsible for.
No, I think it's not Microsoft's fault. But I've been actually keeping up with the questions from the audience. So one of the new questions I saw and I'm really excited about is like a question about like human emotion and AI. So do you think that like AI is gonna excel in like human emotions and like start becoming intrusive, or is there something that we should be worried about, or you think it's out of scope for now?
I think it's not out of scope, but I think it tees up what we were talking about earlier, which is AI real? Is it accurate? Is it fair? And all of those other principles. So I think an emotion, it might be teeing up how real is it? How fake is it? It needs to be real and accurate, and it needs not to be fake. It needs to be understood and communicated clearly. That's why you need a responsible AI framework in whatever you are, whether you're a cloud provider or a consumer or whatever. So I'm not scared of it, but it's something that must be managed as a characteristic of a good service, and not an afterthought. A few years ago, we might have been worried about the UI, the user interface. Then we started to think about the user experience, which is a sort of richer, more 3D view of the same thing. Now I have to think about the ethical experience and the trust that the human consumer places in these platforms and these services. And I think trust is a really good word, because we know that trust is hugely valuable, hard sought, and easily lost if the service proves itself not to be reliable, authentic. And that authentic word is designed to respond to that emotion question. So it's definitely needs to be and is at the very heart of thinking about the nature of the service with whoever is accountable, back to the accountability, for the service that we're talking about.
Thank you. Julie Foster from the UK is opening up a different topic, talking about, do you think technology can help us create meritocracy in the job market for people with disabilities?
I think so. I think, and hi, Julie. I remember when I joined Microsoft, I was quite impressed actually at the thought and consideration for making the services accessible, because they came from not an accessible world. Secondly, some of the most impressive colleagues in Microsoft and indeed elsewhere that I've worked with over the years have dealt with, they're differently abled. And some of their resilience and fortitude and insight. And by the way, the quality of what they are putting into our products. And it's so enriching and exciting to think that someone who is differently able can directly influence what a Microsoft service that's being used by millions of people actually does. So I do think that alongside the prior topic, we do take it very, very seriously. And I think that back to the nature of the way work is done, the more different ways work can be done, both effectively, but also culturally acceptably, the more humans are going to be working for us who are differently abled, I think. So I think that's really, really exciting. And these things are converging, and they help because we need that talent in the workforce. And I think Microsoft's not alone in this, but again, because it's running, with a premier productivity and collaboration solution, I think it does have a very important, arguably almost unique role in it.
Marie from Oxford is changing a bit the focus and talking about gaming. So what are Microsoft's ambitions in the gaming industry?
Oh, wow. I'm not a gaming expert and can't really speak for the gaming guys in detail. And I would say that I run enterprise technology on the whole. I think, purely as Andrew, I observe, well, the metaverse, three-dimensional avatars, and existence in a digital realm feels very much like gaming. Gaming in terms of connecting communities who trade, who learn, who adapt, who meet when they would never have met before, when they can be anywhere on the planet. Well, that sounds very familiar, because am I describing gaming or am I describing the future of work? I think they're fusing. So sometimes I'm asked, well, Microsoft, it's got gaming, but it's got data and enterprise. These are very different things. I don't think they are, actually. I think they're around the modern world being powered by cloud-first services that appeal to humans who might be working, they might not be, or they may be somewhere in between. So I think Microsoft's made it clear just how important gaming is to our world, how Microsoft wants to invest in it and make it as rich and immersive as possible, powered by the cloud. And you can see with acquisitions and other things how seriously it's taking it. Beyond that, though, I'm a gamer like everybody else, and I'm excited to see what they do next.
Fantastic. Anon is also asking back about the topic about AI. How do you evaluate the readiness and preparedness of regulators for AI? Do you think they have the right talents to protect the consumers but allow the companies to innovate?
Well, I think it's back to what's your philosophy on responsible AI and how do you train it, grade it, performance manage it, monitor it, and remove it. Accurate, repeatable, fair. How do you know it's not biased? So it's important, it's essential that the organization is doing those things. So you have those are the questions to ask. And you do it for every product and service. And then you only consume cloud services where the cloud provider is doing the same thing. So that's why Microsoft has a responsible AI framework. That's why it's working hard to prove to itself and others that the AI is fair, reasonable, accurate, predictable, reliable, and all of the other things that we want it to be. And so those are the things that must be done and done on a repeated basis. It's not a one-time intervention. And as I was saying earlier, I think an organization has to think about how it changes its own self and its behavior to operate with this new world and these new technologies, whether or not it's writing them itself or consuming them from somewhere else. These are not things that an organization has traditionally done. It's really important that the technologists make sure the organization does it now. It's not, just a function for the legal department or the marketing department or the sales team. These things cut across all persona within the organization. There's never been a better time to be in tech.
Exactly.
We're running the world, literally and figuratively.
More than so. I mean, Douglas from the UK, he's tapping on that point, saying the metaverse/conference calls are big users of data, really. So what is being done to make access to data and internet more inclusive?
More inclusive. So I'm not sure I'm following the question. I mean, what is being done?
So I think what he refers to is the fact that like for many people across the world, like having access to data or like tech or like internet is not a given. Maybe not in the Western countries, but maybe in some of the developing countries. So is the tech industry responsible while offering these products to also make access to these products easier? Or is it something that lies on the shoulders of public policy or regulators within those areas?
Inevitably, it's probably a function of those things and others as well. I think it's really important for an organization to say what it's in control of and what it can do, what it commits to, and then what it would encourage. So Microsoft needs to make highly competitive products and services available. It needs to operate with open code. It needs to operate in a manner that there's a low barrier to and cost of entry. I think Microsoft does. And then I think some of the other organizations that you're inferring, then in terms of access and in terms of availability of infrastructure and things like that, those questions are very different in different parts of the world. They're important questions. And I think through various sponsorships and other activities, organizations like Microsoft will and can be helping in different geographies. And I think that level playing field for the world is something that we would all aspire to, but takes many different types of organization and governments to achieve.
Yes, I think like that. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's a shared responsibility there. And we're talking about data management. Arvind Iyer, an MBA student from our program, the question is, what are your thoughts on data lineage and governance, cataloging, labeling, the rise of no or low-cost paradigms?
I think you need a very robust philosophy for data governance in your organization. I said it earlier, I think, what is being used by who, how, where, and why? Fundamental questions across all data sets. So how do you, first of all, surface that data? How do you ensure that the accountability structure is clear? How do you ensure that access is securely managed with the right levels of privacy? How do you apply the right metadata? How do you ensure that there is one version of truth? How do you allow connections, but with different tiering based on the nature of data? Because insights that are then generated can be very powerful. They can also be incredibly wrong. How do you then validate those insights and make them predictable, reliable, and repeatable? All of that is done through data governance, with then some cultural decisions about, is your ability to compute and manage that a broad behavior in the organization or allowed by only a few? Cultural questions, not technological questions, really. Again, not wanting to overstate product, but if you're interested in data governance, look at Azure Purview. It's a governance platform for enterprise scale data management that allows you to do everything I've just described and know what's going on. And you need it then to decide on how you're going to allow the organization to generate insights. You need your governance platform, you need your responsible AI framework, you need your data lake, you need your data scientists, and then you may have a hub spoke model as we have. They're all fundamental questions. And yeah, anyone who's interested in governance, look up Azure Purview.
Yes, and I think like this is definitely a topic that, coming from an operations background, like every single organization is thinking about. Like we touched upon that at the beginning, like data management is like lies at the core of creating those necessary capabilities to tap upon them. Ingrid from Wiltshire is giving us a really interesting question to start wrapping up our conversation. What product developments can you tell us about? And I would like to broaden it up a bit and say, you know, what are the new technologies that you're excited about? Like, what are the new things that you see in the future that will change the way we do business?
Well, I think we've talked about the thing I'm most excited about, which is the evolution of Teams. And I won't repeat everything I said, but something that's going to be that digital cockpit that you exist in and primarily through to navigate a three-dimensional realm where you can be yourself or another persona, where you can meet people you would never have met, and where it's a lot more exciting than a two-dimensional website, I think is fundamentally brilliant and exciting. Not possible, Ingrid, without the cloud and the power that we've now got. I think anyone who's a technologist has to be thinking really hard about how their organization looks good and can perform and succeed and thrive in that environment. Thinking back, organizations took several years, I think, to adopt the internet properly. And with websites, we haven't got several years. Think about, those high-end retailers, the high-end car manufacturers. Think about, I think about the fact that I was always surprised to see high-end cars being sold in a mall, shopping mall. It's not a big leap to think about, looking at high-end consumer product completely virtually and talking, and being able to navigate around an organization, visit retail, visit a learning organization in a rich and immersive way. I used to go to the library when I was at Loughborough University in the UK. I hope it's still there, because I realize that as I meet groups like this, the nature of the way learning is done has totally changed since I was a student. Wow. I often think about how would I learn now with the technology that's available today? And I'm jealous of the options that are available when I see family members, who are at college now. Jealous in a positive way. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about, I'm at the completely other end of the scale. The hyperscalers have cloud, and we're running the world's compute more and more and more every day. So we have to get that right at scale with a concentration risk. To ask, but hang on a minute. So aren't we all just creating one big problem for ourselves? As someone who's run services in my own data centers in the past, like the London Stock Exchange years ago, the cloud has a vastly bigger amount of compute and resilience and reliability than any organization could achieve in their own single few data centers. We have to be able to leverage that whilst also avoiding the issues of risk, scaling, and all of that. And I think that's really exciting, because the cloud, which for a long time I think people asked about the security of it and the resilience of it, I mean, it's demonstrably powerful, and I think that's exciting, whichever cloud provider you're talking about. So that's exciting. I think the technologist in me also knows that you can't do everything yourself, and Microsoft knows that as well. So the other thing I'm excited is how do we rewrite the relationship we have with other big organizations who are our partners and friends in the ecosystem. So we're delighted to work with SAP. SAP power all the companies in the world. How they power Microsoft. How do we make SAP and the cloud work together? How do we create that playbook for the world? That's at the enterprise end of things. And I'm excited as well to be part of something that can be an employer of choice with high integrity that people want to be at, to have fun and a rich life, and to meet humans they would never met otherwise. And I think the tech world gives you that opportunity as well.
Definitely. Thank you so much. We have a lot to learn at the business school too, in terms of how do we leverage all these new exciting technologies, and how do we really ensure that the services and the educational experience that we provide to our students really match and tap on the potential of all these new tools. At this point, I'd like to thank you, first of all, for being here, for sharing your thoughts, for giving us all these like interesting lectures and like telling us about your experience. But I would also like to thank everybody who's joined us online, on all social media and the platform. It's been a real pleasure. I greatly enjoyed the discussion. I'm sure everybody else who joined today did so too. Thank you very much.
Agni, thank you to you. And it's great to see everybody. And I hope everyone stays safe and well. And I wish everyone success as they move forward in this strange world.
Thank you.